A brutal display of power tennis from Jelena Ostapenko. She was well down in that second set, but she roared back.
They said she couldn't do it on clay. Not maybe, not let's wait and see. They said it like a fact, a verdict, a final judgment written before the first ball was even struck. Because in their eyes, Alex Eala belonged somewhere else. Hard courts, fast rallies, clean winners, controlled conditions where timing mattered more than survival. But clay? Clay was different. Clay was slow, heavy, demanding. Clay exposed you, and they believed it would expose her. They looked at her game and saw questions instead of answers. They looked at her movement and called it untested. They looked at her past results on the surface and decided the story was already written. She doesn't belong on clay. She won't adjust. She'll struggle when the ball slows down. That was the narrative. And narratives in tennis are dangerous things, because once they take hold, people stop watching to see what happens and start watching only to confirm what they already believe. But Alex Eala didn't arrive in Linz to confirm anything. She arrived to destroy the narrative completely. It started quietly. No dramatic entrance, no announcement, no warning sirens. Just a 20-year-old stepping onto the court with a calm face and a mind that refused to accept limits written by people who weren't standing in front of her. Her opponent that day, Julia Grabher, wasn't there to participate in a story of redemption. She was there to compete. And yet, what unfolded was something else entirely, because from the very first exchanges, something became clear. This wasn't going to be a test of potential. It was going to be a statement, a dismantling, a rewriting of expectations point by point. Grabher tried to dictate early, tried to push Eala into uncomfortable positions, tried to stretch rallies into clay court patterns that would expose inexperience. But something unexpected happened. Eala didn't break. She adapted, not slowly, not cautiously, immediately. She absorbed the rhythm of the surface like she had been born on it. She slid into balls that were supposed to pull her out of position. She extended rallies that were supposed to break her patience. And most importantly, she refused to play the match they expected her to play. She played her own. And by the time the first set settled, the story had already begun to collapse. Because what they thought would be a weakness wasn't appearing. What they thought would be hesitation wasn't there. What they thought would be doubt was missing entirely. Instead, there was control, and control on clay means everything. The first match ended in straight sets, but that detail doesn't tell the truth, because straight sets sound simple, clean, routine. It wasn't. It was a slow erosion of belief, point by point, game by game, a quiet dismantling of a player who arrived expecting resistance and instead found precision. And when it was over, something had shifted, not just in the scoreline, but in perception. Because suddenly, the question wasn't, can she play on clay? The question became, what happens if she actually figures this surface out? And that question was dangerous, because that question leads directly to expectations rising, and expectations are heavier than any surface in tennis. But nobody fully adjusted their thinking yet, because doubt dies slowly, and tennis fans are trained to believe what they've already decided. So when her next challenge was announced, a former Grand Slam champion waiting on the red clay of Linz, the narrative returned immediately. She beat Grabher, but this is different. This is a real test. This is where experience matters. This is where clay exposes her. The tone changed again. The respect was conditional. The belief was temporary. And the pressure was rising without her saying a word. The stadium felt heavier that night, not because of noise, but because of expectation. Clay courts don't just slow the ball, they slow time. Every rally stretches longer than it should. Every shot carries more meaning than it seems. Every mistake echoes. And across the net stood a player who had lived those moments before, a Grand Slam champion, a player who had built a career on this surface, a player who didn't need to believe in herself anymore because she had already proven everything. That kind of opponent doesn't just play tennis, they test identity. They ask one simple question: do you belong here with me? And tonight, That question was aimed directly at Alex Eala. The first few games were not about dominance, they were about information. Both players probing, both players testing, both players trying to understand what kind of match this would become. Eala hit her first clean baseline winner early. Not emotional, not dramatic, just clean execution. The kind of shot that says, "I'm not overwhelmed." Then came the response. Heavy rallies, deep topspin exchanges, clay court geometry unfolding in real time. And slowly, the match stopped being about who was better on paper. It became about who could survive longer in discomfort. Because on clay, comfort is rare, and discomfort is where champions are separated from everyone else. What surprised everyone wasn't that Eala competed, it was how she competed. She didn't retreat behind defense. She didn't collapse into passive patterns. She engaged directly. Against a champion who expected hesitation, she offered resistance. Against experience, she offered aggression. Against expectation, she refusal. Refusal to be intimidated, refusal to be rushed, refusal to accept that the surface belonged to someone else. And that is where the match started to shift from competition to confrontation. But confrontation on clay is never clean. It's never fast. It builds slowly, like pressure underground before an earthquake. And what nobody fully realized yet was this: Eala wasn't just surviving, she was learning. Every rally was information, every return was data, every mistake was adjustment. She wasn't playing a match, she was collecting the blueprint of a future version of herself. And that is what makes young players dangerous. Not confidence, not talent, but adaptation happening in real time under fire. By the end of the opening exchanges, something uncomfortable had become visible for the champion across the net. This wasn't a newcomer afraid of the surface. This wasn't a player hoping to hang in. This was someone trying to take control of patterns that were supposed to belong to the veteran. And when that happens on clay, everything becomes harder, because clay doesn't forgive hesitation, and it doesn't respect reputation. It only respects execution. The first set was still unfolding, but already the match had stopped being about experience versus youth. It had become something else entirely, a battle between expectation and disruption, between legacy and arrival, between what people believed was supposed to happen and what was actually starting to happen in front of them. And somewhere deep inside that slow-burning contest, the real question was forming. Not whether Alex Eala could compete on clay, but whether anyone was ready for what happens if she learns to dominate it. The score doesn't tell the truth. That's the first thing you need to understand about a match like this. Because when you look at it from a distance, it looks simple. Clean numbers, final result, a winner, a loser, a box score that pretends to summarize nearly 2 hours of war in a single line. But tennis at this level doesn't work like that. And this match was never about numbers. It was about distance. Distance measured in seconds. Distance measured in reactions. Distance measured in 6 points that quietly separated history from heartbreak. At this stage of the match, something had already changed in the atmosphere. Not visibly, but emotionally. You could feel it in the way rallies stretched longer than they should have, in the way both players stopped celebrating small wins too loudly, in the way every single point started to feel heavier than the last. Because when you are standing across from a Grand Slam champion on red clay, you don't just play tennis, you negotiate survival. The first set had already established the truth that nobody wanted to say out loud. Alex Eala wasn't overwhelmed. She wasn't outclassed. She was inside the fight, completely, fully, unavoidably. And that changes everything. Because once a match becomes real instead of theoretical, the pressure shifts. Now, it's not about proving potential, it's about proving endurance. And endurance on clay is a different sport entirely. The rallies started to stretch, 15 shots, 18 shots, 22 shots, and each one felt like a slow, tightening rope around both players. No free points, no easy rhythm, no breathing room, just friction, constant, grinding friction. And in that environment, small margins become everything. A ball landing 2 centimeters deeper, a return landing half a second earlier, a recovery step taken 1 beat too late. That's where matches like this are decided, not in highlights, but in micro decisions no one notices in real time. And then came the truth of the match, the part that defines everything, the part that separates almost from actually. 6 points, that's it. 6 points, not games, not sets, not momentum swings you can easily recognize. 6 individual moments where the entire outcome could have tilted in a different direction. 6 moments where the difference between winning and losing was thinner than instinct itself. Think about that. In a match that lasted over an hour and 40 minutes, everything came down to 6 points, 6 swings, 6 decisions, 6 moments where the ball either landed in or out by fractions that the human eye barely processes in real time. That is the brutality of professional tennis. It doesn't reward effort evenly. It rewards timing under pressure. And pressure doesn't care how young you are, or how talented you are, or how much potential people see in you. Pressure only cares about execution. At one point, Eala found herself in the deepest part of the battle. Rally after rally, she stayed engaged, not surviving passively, not retreating, engaging, trying to move the champion, trying to open angles, trying to create space that didn't naturally exist on this slow red surface. And it worked, just enough to matter. Because this wasn't a mismatch, this was a duel, a real one, where neither player was willing to step away. The crowd could feel it now too, that shift, that realization that this wasn't going to be routine, this wasn't going to be a comfortable win for experience, because every time Ostapenko pushed forward, Eala answered. Every time the champion tried to assert authority, the response came back heavier than expected. And that's when something subtle began to appear: frustration. Not loud, not dramatic, but visible in the smallest details. A longer pause before serves, a tighter grip after unforced errors, a glance toward the team box that said more than words ever could. Because when a young opponent refuses to disappear, the pressure reverses, and that's where the match truly changed shape. Not in score, but in psychology. Because suddenly, the champion wasn't just playing an opponent, she was carrying expectation. She was expected to win. She was expected to dominate. She was expected to close. And expectation is heavier than any rally. Eala, on the other hand, had something different: freedom. Not pressure-free freedom, but the freedom of being underestimated, the freedom of having nothing to lose in the eyes of everyone watching. And that is dangerous in elite sport, because players with nothing to lose don't play safe, they play fearless. And fearless players extend matches far beyond what should be possible. The second set turned into a collision, not a pattern, not a rhythm, a collision. 2 styles clashing on a surface that refused to give either player an advantage. Heavy topspin against controlled aggression. Defensive absorption against forward pressure. Every rally became a negotiation of survival. And in the middle of it all, Eala stayed there, not fading, not collapsing, standing inside the storm. And then came the moment everyone would later point to, not because it ended the match, but because it defined it. A stretch of games where momentum tilted violently toward the champion. 6 consecutive games. A run that looked on paper like a breakaway, like control being established, like experience finally taking over. But even in that stretch, something strange happened. Eala didn't disappear. She resisted. Every game was still contested. Every hold still had tension. Every point still had weight. Because even when momentum shifts, true competitors don't vanish. They push back. And push back she did. Because after the storm came response, a run of her own. Not as long, not as statistically dominant, but emotionally significant. She dug back into the match, refused to let it end quietly, refused to let the champion walk away unchallenged. And suddenly, the narrative that was supposed to be simple wasn't simple anymore. The scoreboard showed control, but the court showed resistance. And in matches like this, those two things don't always align. Because control on clay is fragile. It can look absolute and still be 1 point away from collapsing. As the second set reached its final stages, something became clear to anyone watching closely. This wasn't a match being decided by skill alone. It was being decided by moments, tiny ones, invisible ones, the kind that never make highlight reels but decide careers all the same. A second serve that sat up instead of kicking away, a return that found the line instead of the net, a recovery step taken one beat too late. That's where matches like this are decided, not in highlights, but in micro decisions no one notices in real time. And then came the truth of the match, the part that defines everything, the part that separates almost from actually. 6 points, that's it. 6 points. Not games, not sets, not momentum swings you can easily recognize. 6 individual moments where the entire outcome could have tilted in a different direction. 6 moments where the difference between winning and losing was thinner than instinct itself. Think about that. In a match that lasted over an hour and 40 minutes, everything came down to 6 points, 6 swings, 6 decisions, 6 moments where the ball either landed in or out by fractions that the human eye barely processes in real time. That is the brutality of professional tennis. It doesn't reward effort evenly. It rewards timing under pressure. And pressure doesn't care how young you are, or how talented you are, or how much potential people see in you. Pressure only cares about execution. At one point, Eala found herself in the deepest part of the battle. Rally after rally, she stayed engaged, not surviving passively, not retreating, engaging, trying to move the champion, trying to open angles, trying to create space that didn't naturally exist on this slow red surface. And it worked, just enough to matter. Because this wasn't a mismatch, this was a duel, a real one, where neither player was willing to step away. The crowd could feel it now too, that shift, that realization that this wasn't going to be routine, this wasn't going to be a comfortable win for experience, because every time Ostapenko pushed forward, Eala answered. Every time the champion tried to assert authority, the response came back heavier than expected. And that's when something subtle began to appear. Frustration. Not loud, not dramatic, but visible in the smallest details. A longer pause before serves, a tighter grip after unforced errors, a glance toward the team box that said more than words ever could. Because when a young opponent refuses to disappear, the pressure reverses. And that's where the match truly changed shape. Not in score, but in psychology. Because suddenly, the champion wasn't just playing an opponent, she was carrying expectation. She was expected to win. She was expected to dominate. She was expected to close. And expectation is heavier than any rally. Eala, on the other hand, had something different: freedom. Not pressure-free freedom, but the freedom of being underestimated, the freedom of having nothing to lose in the eyes of everyone watching. And that is dangerous in elite sport, because players with nothing to lose don't play safe, they play fearless. And fearless players extend matches far beyond what should be possible. The second set turned into a collision, not a pattern, not a rhythm, a collision. 2 styles clashing on a surface that refused to give either player an advantage. Heavy topspin against controlled aggression. Defensive absorption against forward pressure. Every rally became a negotiation of survival. And in the middle of it all, Eala stayed there. Not fading, not collapsing, standing inside the storm. And then came the moment everyone would later point to, not because it... By the time the match reached its final stretch, something had already become undeniable. This was no longer about prediction. It was no longer about ranking. It was no longer about experience versus youth. It was about survival. Pure survival. Because matches like this don't end when someone plays better tennis. They end when someone finally stops responding. And neither player was willing to stop. The scoreboard showed a champion, but the court showed a war. A slow-burning, physically exhausting, emotionally draining war where every single point felt like it required something extra from both players. More legs, more lungs, more courage, more belief. And belief is the first thing that usually disappears under pressure. But not tonight. Because Alex Eala was still there, still running, still sliding, still fighting for every ball like the next shot might be the one that changes everything. She wasn't playing like someone learning clay. She was playing like someone refusing to be removed from it. And that difference matters more than any statistic. But across the net stood a different kind of pressure. Experience pressure. The kind that doesn't panic easily. The kind that has already been in finals, already lifted trophies, already survived nights exactly like this one. And that is what makes champions dangerous in tight moments. They don't need to believe. They already know what closing looks like. Yet even that certainty was being tested. Because every time Ostapenko thought she had control, Eala extended the rally. Every time she tried to step forward and finish, the ball came back deeper, heavier, slower, more demanding. And slowly, what should have been a straightforward finish turned into resistance. And that resistance is what defines this match. Not dominance, not collapse, resistance. The refusal to let the match become easy for anyone. There is a moment in every long clay court battle when fatigue becomes louder than strategy, when legs stop reacting instantly, when arms stop swinging freely, when breathing becomes something you notice instead of something automatic. And at that point, tennis stops being about tactics. It becomes about willpower, and whoever has more of it survives. Eala reached that point, so did her opponent. Both players were now operating in survival mode. Every point required calculation, every rally required commitment, every serve required mental reset, because nothing was free anymore, everything was earned. And that's when the truth of the match returned again, the same truth that had been quietly shaping everything from the beginning. 6 points, that invisible gap, that razor-thin margin between what could have been and what actually happened. 6 moments where everything shifted just slightly away from her reach. Not because she wasn't close, but because at the highest level, close is never enough. There were rallies in this final stretch that lasted longer than most entire games in other matches. 20 shots, 25 shots, relentless exchanges of topspin, depth, and defensive recovery. Every time Eala pushed forward, the response came back even heavier. Every time she opened the court, the champion closed it again. It was like watching two players refusing to accept that the other would break first. And yet, even in defeat's shadow, Eala never stopped creating pressure. That is what makes this performance different from a simple loss. She was not being carried through the match. She was actively shaping it, forcing errors, forcing decisions, forcing a Grand Slam champion to play deeper into her limits than expected. And that alone changes perception. Because champions don't just win by scoring more points, they win by making opponents disappear mentally. But that didn't happen here. Eala never disappeared, not once. Even when the momentum shifted, even when games slipped away, even when the scoreboard started to lean, she stayed present in every rally. And presence at this level is power. As the final games unfolded, tension stopped being something you could analyze. It became something you could feel physically. Every serve felt heavier, every return felt sharper, every rally felt like it carried consequence far beyond the point itself. And the crowd understood it now. This wasn't routine anymore. This was survival on both sides. At one stage, Ostapenko surged again, a burst of aggression, a run of points that looked like it might finally break the resistance. 6 consecutive games earlier had already shown what happens when she finds rhythm, but this time it wasn't as clean, because every surge came with response, every push forward came with resistance, every attempt to close was met with one more rally, one more ball, one more fight. And that is where fatigue becomes dangerous. Not physical fatigue alone, mental fatigue. The exhaustion of expecting a point to end and realizing it doesn't. The frustration of thinking control is secured and seeing it slip again. The pressure of knowing the opponent on the other side refuses to vanish. That kind of pressure builds silently until it shows itself in small cracks, double faults, short misses, slight hesitations, and suddenly nothing feels automatic anymore. Even so, Ostapenko held on, because champions at this level don't collapse easily. They adjust, they absorb, they find a way, and eventually, through sheer experience and execution under pressure, they push the match towards its conclusion. But the final score was never the full story. It never is in matches like this, because what people will remember is not just who won. They will remember how close it was. They will remember how every set felt like it could have tilted differently. They will remember the moments where everything hung on a single shot, a single decision, a single breath. And most of all, they will remember this, a 20-year-old stepping onto clay against a Grand Slam champion and refusing to be erased. Because that is the truth beneath everything. This match wasn't about defeat.
It was about a rival. Not a rival in rankings, not a rival in headlines, but a rival in something more important. Belief. Belief that she can stand in these moments. Belief that she can compete here. Belief that she can eventually turn matches like this into victories. The numbers will show a loss. The scoreboard will move on. The tournament will continue. But the match itself leaves something behind. A signal, a warning, a reminder that the gap is no longer what people think it is. It is smaller, much smaller, 6 points small. And in tennis, that is nothing and everything at the same time. Because 6 points is not dominance. It is not control. It is possibility. And possibility is the most dangerous thing a prizing player can carry into the future. As the players finally left the court, one with victory and one with experience gained through fire, the real story was already forming in the background. Not about what happened, but about what is coming next. Because matches like this don't end careers, they start trajectories. And somewhere in that trajectory, in the training courts that come next, in the repetition of serves and returns, in the quiet grind that nobody sees, this match will return again and again, not as failure, but as instruction. 6 points. That's all it was. 6 points away from a completely different ending. 6 points away from rewriting everything. 6 points that now become fuel. And if there is one thing tennis history has proven again and again, it is this. Players who come this close don't stay close forever. They cross over.
Dun dun dun. Just a champion.